Good afternoon and welcome to Praxis Peace Institute's Friday afternoon series. I'm Georgia Kelly, the Director of Praxis. Today we are fortunate to be hosting Goodman, an important expert in the making and unmaking of beliefs. We're going to focus on the power of beliefs, how they impact our lives, relationships, and politics. Lion is the author of Clear Your Beliefs and the Narcissistic Primer, and he also is the co-author with Anodea Judith, who is on this call, of Creating on Purpose. Lion is a certified professional coach and the co-founder of the Luminary Leadership Institute. He has taught workshops in the US, Canada, Europe, China, South America, and has even been invited to Estonia this summer. So he's written more than 100 articles and blogs on consciousness, beliefs, the mind, developmental psychology, and personal development. He has been an active participant and leader in the men's movement for more than 30 years and served as director of men's programs for the Shift Network. Since beliefs and perceptions determine behavior on all levels, this is one of the main reasons why I've invited Lion. It is such an important program. So welcome, Lion. It's great to have you with us today.
Thank you, Georgia. It's a true pleasure to be here with you.
Smashing. So the first question is probably going to be the most difficult for our listeners, but it's where we probably should begin, in this uncomfortable place. And that is, how do we assess our own beliefs? That is, how do we determine if they are rigid, if we are closed to further reassessment or learning about our beliefs or even questioning them? So I would like you to talk a little bit about how we can begin to re-examine the beliefs that we've just accepted as true. What does the self-assessment process look like?
Well, I need to take a slight step back, which is to answer the question, what are beliefs? Because if we know what they are, then we can identify them more easily. So for me, beliefs are the conclusions that we came to, either by someone telling us something or are experiencing something, that basically set up our personality, our responses to the world, how we interact with other people, how we see the world. So it's really the infrastructure of the human mind. A lot of people think of beliefs as mental constructs, like I think there should be less government or there should be more government. Those are mental constructs, mental beliefs. But beliefs go much deeper than that. They're actually at the infrastructure level. And the reason is because our beliefs are made of our experiences, and our experiences are multidimensional. So right now you're seeing and hearing and feeling and tasting and sensing, and you're in an environment and the environment's influencing you. And so your experience is always multidimensional. We're not one-dimensional beings. Beliefs come from our experience, so they must also too be multidimensional. So a belief is something that we don't just think, we also feel and experience. So when you say something like, there's something wrong with me, that gives you a direct body sensation, a feeling or a mood that gets generated by that belief. Or if you meet someone who says, I love Trump, that will give you a certain body sensation, right? We're reacting to that statement with our full experience as a human being. So for me, it's beliefs all the way down. You've heard the old story of it's turtles all the way down. I think it's beliefs all the way down, which means that anything we say is a belief, because language is a belief structure. When we look at an animal and say that is a cat, then we're basically asserting a belief that is a cat. If you get to know a cat, you find out that it's a whole being. It has reactions and moods and a personality. But if you just say that is a cat, we've kind of cut all of that experience off of the animal, and we've labeled it. A label is a belief, and now it's just a thing. We thingify it or reify it. So our beliefs are really pandemic through our life, who we believe we are, who we believe others are, and how we should treat them, what we believe about the world, what we believe about politics. So pretty much you could say anything that you say is a belief. Now we have to look at what's truth, because truth is a different concept than beliefs. Truth is a generally agreed belief that is generally acknowledged as true. And we have scientific truth, which comes from experimentation and duplication and replication. And then we have political truth, which is whatever the boss says. So this is a lot of a very wide spectrum of conversation to have. You're muted, Georgia, but you did ask me about self-assessing.
Sorry.
Yeah, that's okay. Let me talk about the self-assessment. We have a, a belief self-diagnosis in my free ebooks that we give out. It's basically a way of finding out what are the subconscious beliefs that we have, because we're mostly aware of our conscious beliefs, but there's a lot operating at the subconscious level. So a simple way to find out what you believe is this process I came up with, which is to say something I believe about politics is, and then you listen to your mind. And then you write down whatever you hear. So something I believe about politics is it's dirty. So you write down politics is dirty. Something I believe about politics is uh, the losers never lose and the winners never win, or whatever the thought is, you write it down. And pretty soon you have a long list of things that your subconscious mind has fed to you as beliefs in the subconscious realm. So that's one way to begin the process.
That it does segue into what I wanted to ask you. This morning, I read an article in the New York Times that fits into this quite well. And the title of it is College is All About Curiosity, and that requires free speech. So he lists one of these interesting examples, and I'm going to quote it. It says, a goal of higher education must be to train our students and often ourselves away from reenacting endlessly the famous 1954 experiment by Albert Hastoff and Hadley Cantrell, in which students at Dartmouth and Princeton watched a film of a penalty-ridden football game between the two schools. When questioned about what they witnessed, each side's partisans saw mainly the fouls committed by their opponents. In short, they found what they were looking for, and really only what they were looking for. So I'd like you to talk about that process where we fool ourselves into seeing something that isn't necessarily true at all, but it's what we want to believe. And instead of reflecting and thinking about, okay, what did I really see there? We seem to go into this reactive lizard brain mode without thought. How do we deal with that process?
First of all, we're not fooling ourselves. We're actually just using the machinery that we were born with. So the machinery is set up. We say that addictions are basically the machinery gone wild, right? Well, beliefs are like an addiction. They feed us. We've learned something. We believe it. We then are looking through the lens of that belief, and it's everywhere we look. So if I believe poor people are bums, that was something my dad believed. So if I take that on and I'm looking through that, when I see a poor person, I think bum. I don't see the person. I don't see the humanity of them. If you're in Israel, you see Palestinians as terrorists. If you're a Palestinian, you see the Israelis as aggressors. So we're looking through our beliefs all the time. And that's why beliefs always are self-verifying. We always see the evidence for our belief. So why? Because we're looking through that lens and we don't see the lens, we only see what's coming through it. It's like wearing dark sunglasses and you don't know that you're seeing through dark sunglasses. The world looks normal till you take them off and go, whoa, I was seeing an altered color scheme, right? It's just part of the machinery of the mind. So it's not like we're fooling ourselves, because if you fool yourself about a subject, I might be fooling myself a different way about the same subject. And that's what it turns out to be, is that we all are seeing through those lenses. It's very difficult to clear all the lenses because we have tens of thousands of beliefs that we've accumulated since being born. And in fact, we start the process while we're still in the womb.
Right. I can believe that. One of the examples that I personally experienced that was shocking to me in a way is I was invited to actually play harp at a wedding in Marin, and they gave me the directions of how to find it. And I saw that the road was right off of Freeway 101. And I said, well, there's no road with that name off of Freeway 101. They made a mistake. So I went online and looked at MapQuest, and MapQuest said the same thing. And I thought, how can MapQuest be wrong too? I mean, this is how convinced I was that that road did not exist because I had never seen it on the sign. And I thought, well, the next time I drive down there, I'm just going to have to look. And the next time I did drive down, I saw the name. And the name of that street was under the name that I always noticed, but not, I didn't notice the second one. But to me, it was an incredible lesson on, wow, we only see what we expect to see. And we don't believe it if we don't expect to see it. So I have never forgotten that because it has been kind of a guide to me to look at these things, which now brings me to another question that I think dovetails on that last idea, is to look at cultural beliefs and how they shape our behavior, as well as what is acceptable to believe. This has been called the Overton window of kind of where the barriers are. They're invisible, but they're there, of what is acceptable to question, what is acceptable to talk about or to believe. And this has put really not just blinders, but has kind of incarcerated ourselves. It's like a belief prison without walls, where there are things that people are afraid to question because they'll be ridiculed or they'll be not understood. And do you have anything to say about that?
I have a lot to say about this
I
topic.
thought you might.
It's important to recognize that one of our deepest core survival instincts is to belong. If you think about monkeys in the trees, a troop of monkeys, they only survive because they are a troop. If a monkey gets pushed out of that troop, they're going to be dead meat. They're going to get eaten by a predator very quickly, right? So our survival depends on our connectivity, on our belonging. And so this deep instinct causes us to take on the behaviors and the beliefs of whoever we're around and whatever we belong to. In fact, if you want to belong to a group like a church or a business group, the way to do that is to take on the beliefs of the group. That is the way to become a member of the group. And if you believe something different than the group, you're either going to be ostracized or criticized or in some cases nailed to a cross. So it's dangerous to believe something other than the group you belong to. Now, the group that we belong to, our first troop, is our family. And then as we grow, the family gets extended. We now have friends. That's another group. So we take on our friends' beliefs. And then we go to school and we want to be liked by the teacher. So we take on the teacher's beliefs. And then we get into a clique, or we want to be in a clique. So we start behaving like the kids in the clique in order to be accepted in the clique. So this is a process that goes on for our entire lives. And when we come across a belief that doesn't fit our beliefs, our already existing beliefs, it puts us into what's called cognitive dissonance. It means there's something off, like you couldn't see the sign. The MapQuest said one thing, you felt you were sure that it wasn't there. And that puts the brain into cognitive dissonance. And when that happens, it's so uncomfortable. It's a feeling of anxiety that we want to collapse it back down into a new truth. And so we either compromise into a new truth, or we reject the truth we had before and take on the new one, or because living with opposing truths is very uncomfortable. So again, this is just part of the machinery. It's part of what we're made of. And so it's not really our fault. We could say it's the fault of the design.
Yeah, I think so much with teenagers, that the desire to fit in is so strong that it's hard to really individuate in a sense when
Yeah.
that impulse is so strong. Before we go on, do you have anything to say about that, about really the adolescent mind and beliefs?
The mind is the same at all ages. You could take someone who's our age
Mhm.
and try to convince them of something different, and they'll stand their ground. And the other thing about this process is that if someone with very strong feelings, we call them a fundamentalist, but they could be a fundamentalist Christian, a fundamentalist Muslim, a fundamentalist businessman. It doesn't matter. What fundamentalist is very clear about what they believe and what the truth is. And if you try to present facts to them that are in opposition to their beliefs, they dig in further. They don't, it's very difficult to open to new beliefs or new ideas. And because the brain operates on these neurons that create patterns, the patterns get reinforced over and over and over again. You listen to Fox News, You get Fox News that comes in every day, every day, every day. Pretty soon you can't see anything else because you've been fed a particular pattern of way to see the world. And so, there's a great book written by a woman whose father ended up becoming a Fox News uh, addict. And she had to actually pretend the TV was broken after unplugging it so that he couldn't watch it anymore. And over a couple of months, he came back to himself. So this is something, it doesn't matter what age you are. We all take on our beliefs. It's hard to question them. But when you do question them, you open space. It's uncomfortable space because you're doubting what you already know, but it does expand your possibilities.
Yes, that reminds me. I wanted to ask you a little bit about, I think many of us in this group probably have some relatives, or we know some people who are MAGA-hatted people. They believe in some of the right-wing conspiracies, or they support Trump, and they just block out a whole part of the reality of who that man is. Do you think there's any way, I mean, I know that facts have no impact whatsoever, but do you think there's any way we could help open minds of people who think like that, or is it a lost cause?
Boy, that's a tough one. I haven't found any way to leverage a person's beliefs unless they want to change. It's the old joke about how many psychotherapists does it take to change a light bulb? Only one, but the light bulb has to want to change. It's like that. Um, I know that relationship, there's been a lot of studies of this, but the closer the relationship and the more honoring you do in your listening to the other person, you know, so start with listening. Then if the relationship is good and important, then the person can open slightly, and you might be able to get in one or two new concepts or beliefs. But a fundamentalist is a fundamentalist. They're quite clear that they're right and you're wrong. And so anything you say will be held against you.
I want to ask you about an area that I know you're quite experienced in, and we discussed earlier, and that is about trauma. How trauma, especially unacknowledged trauma, has influenced beliefs, and how those beliefs then shape what we do, our well-being or lack of well-being.
Sure. First of all, we all know what children need. They need to be held, seen, heard, loved, cared for, nurtured, and supported, right? That's what all children need. We think of trauma as being beaten, but there's all kinds of trauma, including neglect, not being paid attention to, not being heard or seen, not being cared for or nurtured. So the trauma is a very long spectrum. And what happens in trauma is when your needs aren't met, the mind has to come up with a reason why that's happening, because that's a way to take the cognitive dissonance and solidify it in some way. So if I'm being beaten by my father, I have to come to a conclusion. I cannot conclude as a child that there's something wrong with my father. Some children are able to do that, but most children blame themselves. There must be something wrong with me. So this is a conclusion that the child comes to sort and make sense of the world. Now that's one type of conclusion, one type of belief that a child can come to. But there's also a thing called trauma learning. I had this with a recent client. He was walking down he remembered, after doing some work with me, he remembered walking down the street with his mother at age 3, and he saw a shiny penny and he reached down to pick it up. He was very excited, and his mother jerked him back and said, "Don't touch that, it's dirty." And he suddenly realized why he couldn't hold on to his money, because it was dirty and he shouldn't touch it. And so that's trauma learning. Like, mom is mad, something bad is happening, don't do that ever again. That's, again, what the mind does in order to not be thrown out of the nest and die. So we have this survival instinct that's really at the bottom of all of these things, is like, if I align with mom and dad, they will like me, and therefore they won't throw me out to the wolves. If I am the more I am like them, the more they will like me. You've also heard of Stockholm syndrome, our famous famous one is Patty Hearst, right? She was captured by the Symbionese Liberation Army, and within a couple of weeks, she was spouting their philosophy and became, one of their people. And that's a very famous thing that happens when your life is in danger. You take on the beliefs of your captors because they could kill you, and by taking on their beliefs, you will survive. And it turns out that all children have Stockholm syndrome because their parents could kill them very easily. So they just, yeah, tell me what to believe. I'll take that.
Very interesting. The process of changing one's belief, as you describe, is not linear, and that you have tools that you've developed over many decades that work. As you say, they're not a magic bullet, but it is a step-by-step process. Can you tell us what some of these things are in this toolkit?
Sure. I've gathered about 20 different tools from my 40 years of R&D, trying to fix myself. That was my project that led me to this area. It's like I knew there was something wrong with me. I wasn't sure what it was. And so I took over 100 workshops and trainings and studied with therapists and shamans and gurus in order to find out what was wrong with me. Fortunately, after many decades, I found out there was nothing wrong with me to begin with, but it did lead me on this path. And so in all of that time, I found that sometimes most of the techniques that were tried to change who I was or change what I believed produced temporary or partial results. I felt better for a couple of days after a workshop, but then a week later, I was back to the same old person I was before. But every once in a while, something big would shift, and I'd really feel like a different person. And that was a permanent and profound change. And so I realized that that was when there was a core belief change. I changed who I believed I was. My fun example is when I was in therapy as a young man, I suddenly realized it's not my mother's fault. And that was a revelation, right? Because it took me from being, from blaming my mother for everything bad that was happening to like, oh, I guess I need to take responsibility for myself. So that's the kind of shift that I was looking for. And so what I did is I gathered the best processes for those very deep and fundamental shifts and brought them together into the Clear Beliefs method. So in terms of where do we start? We start with what are you experiencing that you'd rather not experience? That's a really good question to just open it wide and say, what's going on that you don't like? And from there, we say, okay, this is what's happening. I'm fighting with my girlfriend all the time. Now, to me, there's an ultimate cause of everything. And so my work is to find the core beliefs or the pattern that's underneath what's happening at the surface. And so I spend a lot of time on this part of the process of finding out what's underneath that. Well, what's underneath your fighting with your girlfriend? She's always complaining about me. Okay, what's underneath that? Well, she doesn't like the way I leave stuff around. Okay, well, what's underneath that? Well, I don't want to be told what to do. Ah, we're getting deeper, right? Well, what's underneath that? Well, my mother always told me what to do, and I hated it because I wanted to do my own thing. Now we're getting even closer. So we work our way down the pattern, and we find out that there's not just a thought, but a whole experience. Mother was constantly telling me what to do. I pushed away. I made the promise to myself, I'm never going to listen to anybody who tells me what to do. Aha, now we've got the gold at the bottom of the slime pit.
Well put.
And now we've got something to work with. So we have a number of different techniques, but a lot of the techniques are based on guided imagery. So we take the person back to the original experience of mother telling you what to do and you hating it and hating her, and basically reconfigure that situation. So in psychology, there's a process called memory reconsolidation. And about 5 years ago, I discovered it and I said, oh, that's what we've been doing for 20 years. So there's now psychological evidence, psychological processes for doing what I've been teaching for 20 years. But basically, we're taking a memory and a pattern and taking it apart and changing it and putting it back together in a new and better configuration. So instead of, I hate my mommy for telling me what to do all the time, it's like, well, mom was doing her job and she had a job to do, and I wasn't very cooperative. And so it caused this friction, and that's what happened. So it's a different understanding from the original little kid who's just, I'm not going to do that anymore. So it matures the person, it matures them, their inner process to a place, and we have methods of actually clearing it completely. And then when it's cleared completely, there's space. Like that program is just gone. It's like deprogramming bugs in a computer. You get rid of it. Sometimes you replace it with a better program, but often you just take it out of the way. So many different techniques that make up the methodology, but that's the basic arc of our work.
That's really interesting. And I'm thinking probably another thing that happens as you were talking, I'm thinking, what the little kid is doing or the adult is doing from that little kid experience of not wanting to be told what to do is basically putting himself at the center of the universe. And the mother is just kind of an object that's doing something. So it's a very interesting way of making oneself what it's all about instead of saying, okay, that person also had problems or had trauma in her life. And
Yeah.
understanding, being empathic is, I think, part of what you're also talking about, is it?
It is very much so. I'll give you another important example. There's sometimes when we go look for the source isn't in memory. There's no, and so we go back further into the womb. Babies in the womb are part of the mother. So they're eating what she eats, they're thinking what she thinks, they're feeling what she feels, and they're experiencing what she experiences. So if the mother is in war or poverty or has a violent husband and she's in danger, she feels fear, and her fear hormones go right into the placenta and into the developing fetus, and the baby's growing up with fear. And when the baby comes out, that baby already believes the world isn't safe. And so sometimes it's actually prenatal belief conclusions. And it's very striking when that happens, because the person goes, oh my God, that wasn't my belief, it was my mother's belief. And that when we have a way of sort of cutting those cords, so it gets released, and suddenly they're a different person because they're not carrying around that burden that they took on in the womb, or sometimes as a very young child. So that's another example of how profound this can be when we're working with people and releasing the things that are tying them down, the burdens they've been carrying their whole life.
Yeah, this is very interesting. Before I get into asking questions from our audience, we didn't touch too much on the political except in the periphery, but I think what you're describing really helps us understand where people's fundamentalism comes from. And it seems like a very frightened place, that a fundamentalist on one level is a very frightened person, frightened to really learn more about the world. It's safer to have it very contained and very predictable.
Well, remember, I talked about cognitive dissonance, which
Mm.
causes a feeling of anxiety, right? So if I don't know what to believe, or if I don't know what something is, I'm going to be anxious. I'm going to feel that sense of like, I don't know. Like when you're about to get on a roller coaster for the first time, it's like there's all that vibration in your chest and your throat, and it wants to be resolved. Anxiety wants to be resolved, and so when you take on a belief, it resolves the anxiety. So if I don't know why the political situation is what it is, I don't know why people are fighting, I don't know why people are yelling and screaming, I want to grab on to something that gives me solidity in the sense of, okay, that's the answer. Same with conspiracy theories. The world's a very complex place. There's all kinds of shit going on all the time, and it's confusing as hell. So what can I believe? What can I take on and believe that this is what's true? That explains it all. Aha. It's the cabal that has all the money, or it's the cabal that made of Jewish space lasers, or whatever, whatever that thing is, that
Pizzagate.
that gives me a security that I know now. I know something. I'm not in that state of not knowing. The brain does not like that state of not knowing. It's really uncomfortable.
Yeah.
So we'll grab onto anything. And if we're in a group that all believes the same thing, I'm going to grab onto their belief because now I've not only resolved my anxiety, but I'm also belonging with the group. So double win.
That's a conversation that Sam Keen and I have had many, many times. How important it is to be okay with the space of not knowing.
It's
And
a sign of maturity and
yes,
wisdom.
yes,
Absolutely.
it's a
Yeah.
sign of maturity and wisdom that one can allow oneself to go
Mhm.
into that place of, I don't know, I don't have the answer. I'm learning. So at this point, I know you and I could go on and talk forever, but I want to open it up to other people to ask questions, and I will call on, when I call on you, you can unmute. Otherwise, I would advise staying muted so that we don't have background noise. So usually it takes a minute or so before people are ready to chime in, but they will. But while we're waiting, I'd like to just mention that your books again. John has put his books in the chat box. You can save that. I actually am saving it right now. And his training programs are also in that chat box. And if you want to say anything more about them, please do so, Lion, if you have any.
Sure. My training is called the Clear Beliefs Coach Training, and it's for coaches, therapists, healers, doctors, social workers, anyone who has clients. Now, at the same time you're learning how to clear other people's beliefs, you're also working on your own. So it's a kind of a dual training, but it's designed for practitioners and people who want to help other people. You don't have to be a professional, but if you have the desire to help others change their beliefs, it's a good training. It's a 4-month training to begin with. There's advanced classes as well. And it's very powerful because we learn what beliefs are, how they function, how the whole system works, how the mind works, essentially, and then apply specific techniques for changing the mind. And you change your own and you change other people, other students in practice sessions in order to get good at it. It's combined with your own intuition, your own wisdom and knowledge. So people come out much enhanced in their ability to help other people.
Great, this sounds wonderful. So Katie has her hand up.
Hi,
Katie?
Leanne. It's really been wonderful hearing you. And I looked you up and listened to some of your YouTubes and podcasts. And as much as I was cynical since I've studied these things for 40 years, I found your insights extremely clarifying and really insightful. So
Thank you.
thank you for that. Um,
Oh, just
so
gonna say Katie's a therapist.
I'm a psychotherapist, and I have been writing my own book about things like this, about change, how personal change happens. The thing that has been boggling my mind is how to make larger change happen worldwide, such as in Ukraine or in Israel or in Pakistan or in Yemen or I know you get asked this, I bet, a lot, within a political party, such as the Liberal Democratic Party, the Republican Party. What's your quick fix on that?
Well, if I had one, I'd be a multimillionaire
You
today.
would.
And I don't, and I'm not. So what I can tell you is that cultural change takes time, no matter what the culture is, business culture, a corporation, a country. And if we look at the arc of change, we see that it actually takes decades. There's the fourth turning and all that, it's slow. And if you want to change something in the social system,
Yeah,
you have to change lots of people's ideas.
yeah.
So you need to learn the art of oration and persuasion and political dialogue and so I think that the one key is dialogue and listening deeply. If you think about South Africa and their reconciliation committees, they heard everyone's truth and they didn't judge it. And they didn't make people wrong for their truth. They just heard it deeply. And that transformed their country. So there's something essential about listening and not making wrong that is a key. It's only one of the keys, but I think it's an important key.
I do
And
too.
knowing that it takes time and knowing that social activism, you guys all know this, but there's a lot of people say, oh, you can just change your thoughts and change your reality. Well, yeah, you can change your personal reality, but that doesn't have any impact at all on the social reality, except you as one among, millions. So social activism is the way to change the society. It doesn't happen from just thinking differently. So those are the only keys I know, and I'm sure you already know them. So
Well, that's a very good distinction to make,
Yeah.
Lion.
Yeah,
Thank you,
thank
Katie.
you. It never hurts to have it be reiterated.
Thank you,
Exactly.
Katie.
Mary,
Yeah, thank you very much for your presentation. My question relates to anti-immigration. For myself, my parents are immigrant from Ireland, and most of the people that I know who are against immigration, if they go back far enough, their own ancestors were immigrants to this country. Do you have any thing that could help in dissuading these people that are anti-immigrant?
Well, unless a person is Native American, they do have immigrant ancestors. So that's one thing you could mention is that well, you come from immigrants, but I don't think that's actually the problem that we call anti-immigration. I think the fear that the Republican Party has managed to create about immigration comes from they're coming to take your jobs. They're coming to marry your white children, and they're going to, weaken the gene line, right? So there's racism in the background, and um, there's all kinds of isms in the background that are influencing this dialogue. And it's not about immigrants because, would you like your strawberries picked? Then unless you want to go pick them yourself, you're going to need an immigrant to come pick them. So it's an economic issue, but it's more of a political fear tactic that's being used. Trump is the peak of this insanity, saying that your bloodlines are going to be diluted. That's what Hitler said. So it is a standard political scare tactic, and if you can scare people, you can control them and give them ideas, because fear is right there with anxiety. It's like, oh no, I don't know what's going to happen, and then you give them a solution, which is, let's build a wall, and then I can relax. Okay, good. The fear is gone. So it's not about immigration as much as it is fear with this long history of the othering people. I remember having this dialogue with Sam Keen when, I think he wrote a book on it, that as soon as we see others, they are dangerous. And this is the tribal thing that you can see in monkey troops. Monkeys cooperate within their troop, but they do battle with the other troops, even though they're all made of the same monkey material. And we do too. So as soon as there is an other, we're not seeing their humanity. We're not seeing that, oh, that's my brothers and sisters coming across that need help. So there's something about the division, the belief that the other is dangerous. That's all part of the mix. And so we need to get to the root of that, that anti-immigration belief structure. And it's not about immigration. It's about those other people and fear of difference. Because again, to the primitive mind, difference is dangerous. Uncertainty is dangerous. Different is dangerous. Same is and like are safe. So it has to do with that very base belief structure in the mind.
Yeah.
And it kept us alive for a couple 100,000 years. So, it's a part of the addictive belief system. So
Yeah,
I don't have a solution, but those are some clues.
yeah, the whole problem of not tolerating difference really starts very young. That would be a whole other thing to take on, which I won't go into now because we have another question. But if there's time, I'd like to go back into that. So Jonathan, you have your hand up. Jonathan, where are you?
You did. Hi, Lion.
Hi, Jonathan.
We met 50 years ago.
Did we?
Yes, we did.
We were young men then.
Yes, you were with TD Lingo.
Oh my gosh, you know about that. Yes, I was.
Oh, yeah. And you came down to the University of Denver, where I was editing a biweekly magazine. I ended up writing about him, and probably you as well. So,
That was amazing.
yeah, yeah. And then we met probably about 10 or 15 years ago. I came up to your place up on the hill in San Rafael. We met briefly. But the one thing I like best about belief was a very wise man once said, truth is what you get other people to believe.
What,
And you'll get $50 if you remember who there was who said that. But that's a great jumping off place in terms of humor, because I think it's very true and very basic.
It is good. And George Carlin said something similar, which is
Tommy Smothers was actually the one who did it.
that's good.
He and his brother were getting some award. He just busted and said, truth is what you get other people to believe. And I thought that's
Yeah, especially
amazing.
when it agrees with you. So I think that's what he was implying, is that when you get someone else to believe what you
Oh,
believe,
yeah.
then it's truth. Then they've learned the truth. And the
Yeah.
same is true when they're trying to get you to believe what they believe. It's like,
Right.
let me convince you of the truth. Let me tell you what's really true. And it's all beliefs all the way down. And by
Right.
recognizing that, we just create more flexibility in our lives. It's like,
Mhm.
oh, I see your point of view. You have a point of view. It's a valid point of view. I honor your point of view, and I have a different point of view. Let's talk about our points of view, and maybe we can find the commonalities. I think that's the best approach, rather than beating somebody over the head with your beliefs and telling them that they're wrong and bad, which usually doesn't have much impact except for resistance.
indeed, for resistance. I know that's one of the areas that often when people disagree, they get to the place of, well, we can't talk about this because there isn't a way to disagree where each party's really listening to the other. So that's something I've noticed politically quite a bit, even in my own political sphere, where people are primarily progressive, but we may come down slightly different on a particular issue. And then we can't talk about it, which seems unbelievable to me, because one person gets all hot and bothered that you don't agree, and it becomes very difficult to have that conversation.
Yeah, if we can stay in open listening, that's really the key. It's without buying what they say, but listening to what they say. It's like, just because they're saying it doesn't mean it's absolute. Anna Dea said something great, which was that we refer to the literal truth, which means it's referring to some literature, the book, but listening deeply to someone and understanding what's underneath what they're saying. What value are they expressing? What's important to them? When you're listening in that way, you're an open ear, you're an open space for them to get out what's important to them. And then they may be in a position to be open to you. But you've got to really get it and even reflect it back and say, here's what I heard you saying. This is what I heard you say was important. Did I get that right? And then when they feel gotten, then they might be willing to get you.
When they're acknowledged, yes. I want to go back, since I don't have another question right now, to go back to that intolerance of difference. And really, we see that from our earliest age. I mean, I remember seeing that in kindergarten, where if one kid's a little bit different than the rest, they're the ones that are picked on or made fun of. And so this happens very early on. And it's something I'd really like to see kind of rooted out of our culture, but it seems so primitive and yet so prevailing.
Well, it's primitive because it's biological. We are social animals, and all social animals have a pecking order, a hierarchy of status. And if you're at the top of the pecking order, you have high status, you get more stuff. You have more resources. You get to have more sex. You get the goodies, the best fruit. You get the first pick of the dead animal. So status is important in all social structures. Chickens have pecking order. The top chicken can peck anybody. If you get pecked on, you have others you can peck, and then the poor one that gets pecked at the bottom that doesn't have anybody to peck, that's a depressed chicken. So wolves have alpha, beta, gamma, delta, right? Alpha wolf, alpha male, and female. Every social, not every, but most social animals have a status assignment system. And so our status assignment system is we judge other people, because monkeys will bop each other on the head or pinch each other if pinch the ones that are lower status. We don't do that. We're too nice. So we internalize that process of assigning status. And if I judge you as lower than me or different than me, then I feel better. I feel superior, a little dopamine rush. If I assess that you're higher than me, then I feel a little bit more down. And now I got to go find somebody else to make lower than me in order to feel better again. So if we think about that as a basic social animal necessity, then it explains some of the stuff that you were talking about.
But this is really the kind of thing we need to evolve beyond.
Yes, absolutely.
We're going to live as mature human beings.
But we can't evolve beyond it until we understand it.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. That's kind of what we've been talking about.
Yeah.
How to understand that whole process. So are there any other comments or questions from anyone? Around. Anything you want to add, Lion, that you would like to mention that I didn't ask you about?
This is kind of my final statement on every program I'm on. If there's something you don't like in your life, question your beliefs about it. If you don't like politics, question what you believe about politics. If you don't like something in your relationship, question what you believe about the relationship and about the other person. If you don't like the economic system, question your own beliefs first, and then you can begin looking at the beliefs that are structurally embedded in the society and the culture. And so whatever you're not liking, examine your own beliefs and really go deep and keep asking that question, what else do I believe? Because that will take what's in the subconscious mind, which is driving us, and bring it up to consciousness. And once it's up in the conscious realm, then you actually have the capacity to do something about it.
Right. I see we have a question for Mike, maybe
Great.
the last one we take. Go ahead, Mike.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, I'm just curious. I don't know if it's mentioned. I have to step away from it. I've always been fascinated by people who, well, like for example, like skinheads, Nazis, white nationalists, call them whatever you want, completely and utterly brainwashed, and oftentimes very sick and disturbed and violent people. There must be either people like you or people you know. I would think if you would study people like this, the ones that have come around and changed, that must be just an incredibly fascinating technique, whatever that is. I wonder if that technique, could be used in a lot of areas, even with people with less extreme, kinds of ideas, but just where it's just, to me, so incredible. It's somebody like that, like you say, from before birth, even probably. I don't know if you can become a Trumpist in the womb. Maybe you can. I thought about that when you said that. But, how do they turn those people around? And finding out those techniques would be, I think, quite fascinating.
Well, you've heard of cult deprogrammers, right?
Yeah.
These are people, and one of the best ways to do it is to grab the person and get them the hell out of the environment that they're in, because the environment is where they are liked, they're accepted, they belong, they have the beliefs, and there's no questioning them. And you first have to get them out of the system in order to begin to open them up step by step. And it's a slow process because you've taken them away from their group. So you're the bad person. So it's a long process to get them to begin opening to the fact that maybe that wasn't so true. I happen to love cult documentaries, so I've watched a lot of them. And sometimes the great man has to fall in order for the cult to wake up. It happened in Scientology, it's happened in NXIVM and many other cults, including the Jehovah's Witnesses. And Trump Trumpism is a cult of personality, and it may be that he has to fall much further than he's fallen today with an $83 million defamation charge. But he has to fall in order for the cult to come undone. But even then, there will be some hold-ons, some holdouts that say he really is right. You can't convince me otherwise. So all you can do is work with the people who have cracked open a little bit, or you do something illegal, like you abscond with them to get them out. That's like the woman whose father was watching Fox. She had to turn off the TV and pretend it couldn't be fixed in order for him to slowly come back to his more open self. So yeah, this is tough. We're dealing with a human mind that's highly addictive, that
And very-
is based on addiction.
Is it very plastic in the fact that he could be watching Fox News and be so influenced by it that he took all these beliefs on.
Yeah.
Then as soon as it's unplugged, given a few weeks or however long, he drops it all. But what that really shows me too is how change our environments, and it might change our beliefs a lot.
True. Change the media you're listening to, and you'll change your beliefs.
Mhm.
Change the people you're around. It's said that we become like the 5 people that we're closest to, and again, it's in order to belong. So, yeah. And you put people in prison, and you've changed from their street environment, for example, into the prison environment. And guess what's going to happen? They're going to take on the beliefs of the prison environment. So you have to be careful where you take them.
Yes. Well, this
Yeah.
has really been fascinating, Lion. I could go on for a long time just talking about some of these ideas and exploring them even further. But I think the books that you have that we put in the chat box and the trainings that you do might be very interesting to some of the people on this call or who watch the recording later. Are there any, and I assume we have every way of contacting you in the chat box.
Yes, and I love having conversations. So on my websites is a way to make a 15-minute chat,
Great.
just to get to know each other and see if we can do something fun together. I would like to mention that we've recently been invited to work with a social services agency in a state government that helps people on welfare. And we'll know in a few weeks whether that project comes through. It looks like it will. And we'll be working with case managers and social workers to help their recipients of welfare change their beliefs so they can get out of welfare. That's a really exciting project that we're involved with right now. And it could take up the coming year. So I'm really glad you had me on today, because I might be too busy a month from now.
Well,
So
we
it's
did it at the
good
right
to-
time.
Yeah.
So I want to thank you. I'm going to stop the recording shortly. So thank you so much, Lion. This has been fascinating today.
Thank you for having me here, Georgia.